You think modern criminals are disturbing? Wait until you hear about the medieval executioner who was paid extra to keep his victims alive as long as possible during torture sessions, because death was considered merciful and mercy wasn't part of the contract. Yeah, that was an actual job requirement. Welcome to a journey through history's most depraved serial killers, where each era seemed to compete for who could produce the most nightmarish human being. We're starting in the High Middle Ages with a man so vile that even hardened medieval folk, people who watched public disembowelments as weekend entertainment, were absolutely horrified by what he did. Peter Nears wasn't just a serial killer. He was something far worse, a practitioner of what medieval society feared most, someone who blended murder with dark magic in ways that made the Black Death look like a minor inconvenience. This man allegedly committed 544 murders. Let that sink in for a moment. 544. But it's not just the number that makes your skin crawl. It's who he killed and what he did with the bodies afterward. Out of those victims, 24 were unborn babies, violently torn from the wombs of pregnant women. Why? For cannibalism and black magic rituals, naturally. Because apparently regular murder just wasn't fulfilling enough for this absolute monster. Nears was part of a loose network of bandit gangs who lived outside the protective walls of medieval cities, preying on travelers stupid enough or desperate enough to venture along lonely roads. Sometimes these gangs organized larger raids, but mostly they stuck to ambushing the vulnerable. Easy targets, maximum horror. Now here's where it gets truly insane. Stories claimed that another gang leader taught Nears a special recipe for invisibility. Yes, you read that right. Invisibility. According to the legend, Nears needed to carry a magical bag filled with specific ingredients, and fetal remains were supposedly essential components for these spells. Some tales went further, describing rituals where the hearts of these unborn children were eaten, still warm from their mothers' bodies, during ceremonies meant to grant supernatural powers. Their fat was rendered down and made into candles. Special candles that would put entire households into such deep sleep that thieves could rob them completely unnoticed. Imagine waking up to find everything you owned gone, and the only explanation being that some psychopath burned a candle made from dead baby fat in your home while you were magically unconscious. Medieval Europe was absolutely terrifying. Authorities first caught Nears in 1577. They tortured him, as was standard procedure back then, and under extreme duress he confessed to 75 murders. Just 75. That's almost quaint compared to what came later. But somehow, impossibly, this man escaped. He vanished back into the criminal underworld and continued his rampage for years. His downfall came in the most idiotic way possible. He left his magic bag, his precious collection of supernatural ingredients, at an inn. Can you imagine being the innkeeper who opened that thing? Inside were hands and hearts from unborn babies, just casually stored like someone's forgotten lunch. The authorities captured him again, and this time they weren't taking any chances. They decided his execution needed to match the horror of his crimes, and what they came up with was genuinely one of the worst executions in recorded history. The execution of Peter Nears took 3 full days. 3 days of methodical, calculated agony designed to make him suffer as much as humanly possible before death finally released him. On the first day, strips of flesh were torn from his body, not cut cleanly but ripped away, and boiling oil was poured directly into the open wounds. Imagine the screaming. Medieval crowds gathered to watch this spectacle, cheering probably because public torture was considered entertainment. On the second day, his feet were covered with hot oil and held over glowing coals, essentially slow roasting him from the bottom up. The smell must have been absolutely nauseating, burning human flesh mixed with oil, but the executioner wasn't done. On the third day, Nears was taken to the main execution site and tied to a large wooden wheel, a breaking wheel, one of medieval Europe's favorite torture devices. The executioner struck him with an iron bar 42 times, systematically breaking every major bone in his body 42 times. And after all of that, after 3 days of unimaginable torture, after having his flesh torn off, his feet roasted, and his bones shattered, Peter Neers was still alive. His body refused to die. So finally, to end this nightmare, they cut him into 4 pieces, quartering him while he was presumably still conscious. Only then did death take him. Now, historians will tell you that the total number of murders attributed to Neers was probably exaggerated, since confessions extracted under torture are notoriously unreliable. Medieval authorities loved inflating numbers to justify spectacular executions and reinforce their power. But even if the real number was half of what he confessed to, Peter Neers still represents something uniquely horrifying about the medieval period. If you thought the Middle Ages had a monopoly on nightmare fuel, buckle up, because we're jumping to the early modern era where superstition met sadism in spectacular fashion. Peter Stump, often called the Werewolf of Bedburg, was a German farmer whose story spread across Europe like a particularly virulent plague, infecting imaginations and fueling werewolf hysteria for generations. Under torture, because apparently that's how all good confessions started back then, Stump claimed he'd been practicing black magic since he was 12 years old. 12. Most kids that age are worried about chores or learning a trade, but apparently young Peter was making deals with the devil. According to his confession, Satan himself gave Stump a magical belt that allowed him to transform into a wolf whenever he wanted. Convenient, right? This supposed shape-shifting ability gave him the perfect cover story for his crimes, because who's going to suspect the local farmer when a wolf is terrorizing the countryside? According to the confession, Stump killed 14 children and 2 pregnant women over his years of activity. But he didn't just kill them. That would be too simple, too merciful. He claimed to have torn unborn babies from their mothers' wombs and eaten their hearts while they were still warm, describing them as delicacies. The medieval mind found this absolutely plausible because werewolf legends were deeply embedded in European folklore, and the idea that someone could literally become a beast seemed perfectly reasonable to people who also believed in spontaneous generation and thought bathing was dangerous. Among his victims, Stump even admitted to killing his own son and eating the boy's brain. His own child. The confession also included accusations of incest with his daughter, Beale, who was later executed alongside him. The narrative painted Stump as an agent of Satan, sent specifically to terrorize good Christian folk, which made for excellent propaganda and ensured maximum public attendance at his execution. The execution they prepared for Peter Stump was designed to send a message, and that message was essentially, "Don't be a werewolf, or we'll make you regret every second of your existence." First, his flesh was torn in 10 places with red-hot pincers, grabbing chunks of meat and ripping them away while the metal seared the wounds. Then, his arms and legs were systematically smashed with the blunt side of an axe, destroying the bones but keeping him alive to feel every impact. After they'd thoroughly broken him, literally, Stump was beheaded and his body was burned. But even that wasn't enough for the authorities. They erected a tall pole in the town square and displayed the wooden wheel he'd been tortured on, topped with a carved figure of a wolf and Stump's severed head mounted above it all like some grotesque medieval warning sign. The display stayed up for years, a constant reminder of what happened to supposed werewolves and devil worshippers. Whether Stump actually did any of these things or was simply a convenient scapegoat for unsolved crimes is almost beside the point. The execution and the story served their purpose regardless of truth. Now let's leap forward to the 19th century, to Victorian London, where fog rolled through streets lit by gas lamps and a killer stalked the impoverished neighborhoods with surgical precision. Jack the Ripper, the nickname given by newspapers to an unknown murderer, became possibly the most famous serial killer in history, despite having only 5 confirmed victims, the so-called canonical 5. What made Jack terrifying wasn't the body count, but the method. The absolute precision with which he dismembered his victims suggested medical knowledge or at least butchery experience. At least 3 victims had missing organs, removed with enough skill that investigators seriously considered doctors, surgeons, and medical students as primary suspects. The killer primarily targeted poor women working as prostitutes, women society considered disposable, which is probably why he was never caught. Victorian authorities didn't exactly prioritize protecting sex workers. The case generated massive public interest, and newspapers received hundreds of letters from people claiming to be the Ripper, but none were definitively authenticated. The most famous was the "From Hell" letter, which arrived with half of a human kidney and a note claiming the writer had fried and eaten the other half. Whether this was actually from the killer or just an incredibly disturbed prankster remains unknown. The 5 canonical victims, those most certainly killed by the same person, all shared similar crime scenes. Throats were cut with such force that some were nearly decapitated. Mutilations were performed with precision, and in several cases organs were missing or had been deliberately arranged around the room in grotesque displays. The killer seemed to be sending a message, though what that message was, nobody could determine. Police interviewed thousands of people, tracked hundreds of leads, detained dozens of suspects, and got absolutely nowhere. Local vigilante groups formed, patrolling the streets and offering rewards. Private detectives were hired by concerned citizens, but the evidence never pointed to any single clear suspect. Then, as suddenly as the murders began, they stopped. Jack the Ripper vanished into history, leaving behind only theories, speculation, and the bodies of 5 women whose names, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, deserve to be remembered far more than their killer's nickname. To this day, over a century later, people are still obsessing over Jack the Ripper's identity, proposing new theories, conducting DNA analysis on questionable evidence, and writing endless books about possible suspects. The truth is, we'll probably never know who he was, and maybe that's what makes the story so enduringly terrifying. The idea that someone could commit such public, brutal murders in one of the world's largest cities and simply disappear is deeply unsettling. It reminds us that even in civilized society, even with police forces and investigations and public attention, some monsters slip through our fingers and vanish into the fog, leaving only questions and corpses behind. Victorian London thought itself the height of civilization, the center of a global empire, and yet it couldn't catch one killer. That failure haunts us still.